The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I will start sharing my slides. Hopefully they are visible now. So I'm Jyri Manninen from University of Eastern Finland, and I'm sitting at home in very close to Russian border. Actually, this moment is about 60 kilometers to Russia from my home in the middle of Finland. And my task in this webinar is to explain you in a very short time what is change-oriented adult education. And this is a very challenging task because this concept is quite difficult to understand. But I try to make it clear and short, just to give you a kind of understanding what we are talking about when we are talking about change-oriented adult education in this this course, especially in this first module. After my presentation, Irena Sgier from Switzerland will explain with some practical examples what it means when organizations or people are organizing this kind of change-oriented adult education activities. There's additional material on the Moodle, as many of you have already seen. So, for example, there's a long report we wrote with Irena and my colleague Anna Jetsu for this project. So, if you are more interested in details on this this change-oriented adult education concept and practices, have a look at this report. There's also a longer presentation I made in a Helsinki seminar in December last year. So this short presentation is very short, as I said, but there's additional material, and you are able to ask after this presentation some questions. So I start by explaining why I came interested in change-oriented adult education. Maybe 20 years ago, I was reading lifelong learning policies from different countries, and I paid attention that almost every country described the role of adult education in these lifelong learning policy documents, so that it's something that will help or should help people to cope with life. For example, here's a direct quotation from Estonian lifelong policy. And it says that adult education should improve everyone's capacity and ability to cope with life. And I started to make questions to myself. For example, why can't we write these policy documents and change our practices so that adult education not only helps people to cope with life, but also helps them to change their lives and develop the society? Because I see that this kind of approach and philosophy would make a bigger difference in the society. And when I compare these lifelong learning policies with actual theories of adult education, we can see that the most famous theorists in the field of adult education, they have actually been talking about change-oriented adult education all the time. For example, this Edward Lindemann was living in 1920s in Chicago, and he was using adult education as a tool for community change, not helping people living in slums to cope with their life in slums, but instead trying to help them to change their life situation and develop the community so that the life will be better and so on. There are many other theorists thinking about the same way. And here you can see two examples of books which are available on this topic. So if you are interested on these theories, there's a lot of reading to do. This is the definition we created for our project, because as I told, it's very complex term. And in the beginning of the project, we had to get a common understanding what is change-oriented adult education, and we did a lot of work. Actually, we had 2 face-to-face meetings and a lot of online discussions about this definition, and I think we still have some some problems of defining it. But this is the kind of very good short definition which we created. I'm not going to read it word by word, but have a look at this bold text. So, for example, we are looking for adult education practices that can create individual change or social change. And in the social change, we can talk about organizations or communities or the society in general. So there are different levels of where the change can take place. And we can talk about individual transformation or collective empowerment, whether it's an organization or community or countries in general. And these critical awareness, ways of thinking, active participation, these are kind of keywords which can be used to recognize and define these adult education, change-oriented adult education practices. And the aim of these practices is to develop a more democratic, more equal, and more ethical world or community or organizations. So this is basically the idea. It's very interesting to understand the difference between traditional, not change-oriented, and change-oriented adult education. And this is in more detail explained in the report. But if you read the first text, here this man explains how people who are organizing adult education or doing the adult education policies, they always have some kind of ideology or political interests. They can be hidden or they can be made clear, or they can be something that they don't recognize themselves. They are just acting from the traditional way of doing policies or creating courses and organizing adult education. But somehow these political options are always behind the practices, the policies, and everything we do as adult educators, because adult education is a kind of intervention to people's lives and in organizations and in society in many ways. So we have to be aware of what kind of political options we are actually following and what we are trying to do with these adult education interventions. So this first one, this is very easy and actually a kind of automatic option for adult education courses. If somebody asks us to organize a course for digitalisation for older adults, we quite easily start thinking about, okay, let's teach them how to use mobile phones and social media so they can keep contact with their grandchildren and pay their bills online and so on. But this way, we are trying to maintain the current society and conserve the current situation. But if we take a more change-oriented approach, we can try to use adult education to reform, to improve the system. Or we can even try to do some kind of a structural transformation, which is a bit scary because it includes radical changes and even maybe some revolutionary processes. And then we have some philosophical difficulties on who decides that, okay, this kind of change is needed, and we can even do some revolutions, whether passive or active revolutions, to make the world a better place. But as I wrote in the slide, these two change-oriented options are more difficult. The last one is very difficult actually, and they require also new ways of thinking. And one of the ideas behind this this course in general, and also this first module, is to help you understand what kind of changes we need to make in our thinking on and in our practices. So let's picture, because this explains why the last, this radical change is very difficult political option. Because if we think that, for example, any country would like to change its schooling system and adult education system to make a totally different society, then it would be very dangerous for the policymakers and the people in power at the moment. So I can't understand if some state would finance some kind of radical causes for adults, even they would be very helpful for the better lives and development of communities and so on, because it's dangerous for the state itself unless it's ready to change. So it's a philosophical question. This is a table I made just trying to help you to understand what is the difference between not change-oriented adult education courses on digitalization topic and what are these change-oriented adult education courses based on these two other options. So if you have a look at the course examples, they are real examples from Finnish adult education system. We have, for example, so-called liberal arts organizations providing different kind of courses for adults of different age. And these course topics are taken from these programs. For example, these organizations run basic ICT skills courses for adults and especially for older adults, and the courses on how to use Facebook and some basic courses on Windows programs and so on. So these are very traditional, and of course these are helping people to deal with the challenges of digitalization in their lives, because these are the skills they need in information society. But if you want to improve the society or even change the structures in more radical way, you have to organize a bit different courses for the same adults. For example, a kind of course which could be titled "How to Become a Designer of Your Digital Life." It's a bit different from these basic ICT skills, because then you have to go deeper in the values and the ways how you use social media and so on. And also very good examples, which are reported also in our report and on our website, are courses where you learn to recognize fake news and to learn how to use social media so that you are not distributing these fake news to your friends in the social media. And when we go to this structural transformation part, these course examples are very different. This how to become inspired and inspire others in social media is a real course. I didn't invent the idea. And it was also organized by a Finnish association which is trying to help citizenship education for adults. And it's a very good example how you can use this change-oriented adult education to make the life of associations better by teaching active people to use social media for discussion and dialogue and other activities where they learn how to make the community better. Or we can also have courses like digital activists for developing more democratic social media. So this tries to give you an example what's the difference between the basic traditional not change-oriented education courses and the courses we are talking about in this course. Why we need this kind of change-oriented education? Here are some examples of what kind of motivation they could be. For example, if we as adult educators or adults themselves observe some kind of social problems in their neighborhood, community, or in the society, we could start asking, can we do something for these social problems as adult educators? For example, at the moment we have this some problems caused by digitalization, for example, the exclusion of older adults if they are not able to use the current technology and survive in the closing of the banks. And they can't go to the banks to get the cash, so they have to learn how to use online banking services, and it can cause some problems. Also, we have examples of undemocratic countries' political systems. For example, in the 1950s in the USA, Afro-Americans didn't have civil rights. So they took a kind of very long fight to getting these civil rights, and it was based mainly very much on the change-oriented adult education projects, peaceful kind of activism, looking for change in this undemocratic situation. We also have some very fresh examples. I hope there's no one from the UK, but this Brexit is a very good example of how you can actually influence big voting votings in which make a lot of difference, because if you are able to distribute populist messages in social media, you can change people's ways of thinking and how they vote actually. A very good example are these different inequalities. For example, there's still a lot of gender inequalities, poverty, economic differences, austerities in different countries. And also, there are many destructive ways of behaving and thinking nowadays. And especially these are very visible when we look at the social media and the hate speech, which is distributed in Facebook and so on. And also, some of these needs for change-oriented education could be based on political objectives, which are not necessarily good. For example, I think the most effective and effective civic education program was the Nazi German project, where they changed the attitudes and behaving of the whole nation in a very effective way. But it was not a very good way they did it, but they were very successful in that. So we have to be very careful that the political parties or minority groups are not able to use these change-oriented education methods to change how people think and behave. These change-oriented courses also need a very different teaching methods. These pictures try to explain that when you are organizing a change-oriented course for adults, you can't organize it in a traditional schooling way, so that the people are sitting in their desks and listening passively when the teacher or trainer talks and teaches them something. For example, how to use Facebook. On the contrary, you have to organize the groups so that they can share, they can have a dialogue, they can discuss, as the second picture in the bottom of the slide shows. So this kind of change-oriented education needs and have to use very different teaching methods. And one of the keywords is dialogue, because almost every change-oriented pedagogical model is based on the dialogue, which also leads to critical reflection in many cases. And the aim is to help people to become aware of their attitudes, beliefs, values, ways of behaving, and so-called meaning perspectives, if you use the concept of Jack Mesirow. This kind of practices also try to challenge the existing attitudes, the existing ways of doing things, and values, and so on. It helps people to see things in alternative ways and to do things differently. And also, hopefully, it leads to some kind of action and responsibilities where people actually take these ideas to practice, not only try to memorize them or learn how to think about different things. So now you have a chance to ask questions or make comments.
Thank you so much, Jyri. I just would like to remind you that you would need to select the audience for the chat. So we received, as panelists, we received a lot of comments from an introduction from all of you. This is why at one point you have seen that I copied and pasted them. So you can actually, you can write to everyone by selecting the all panelists and attendees before clicking on send in the chat. So this is something that that you can do. You can ask questions there. You can also raise your hand, and then we will give you the floor. We'll be more than happy to do so. In the meanwhile, maybe I can ask you, Jyri, because you mentioned that basic skills teaching can't be change-oriented. Is it always the case, or if it's organized in a change-oriented ways with a change-oriented methods, basic skills teaching and learning can be change-oriented?
Yeah, good questions. We have actually been discussing this in our project. And a very good example of how to organize basic skills training in change-oriented way is Paulo Freire's pedagogy. I see from the chat that some are commenting that they have been using Paulo Freire's pedagogy. It was actually developed for the teaching of basic reading and writing skills. So the same idea could be used for digitalisation skills. I haven't seen any practical examples yet, but it would be interesting to see how to organize basic ICT skills courses following the Paulo Freire's pedagogy. It should be possible. If you have any examples in the audience, please let us know.
Ivo West was actually saying that they are using Paulo Freire pedagogy. He works at the Caritas Switzerland. So I don't know if you want to tell us more. You're more than welcome to do so. He also quotes a sentence from a book from Richard Scholl. I think we discussed that or there was a suggestion to read this in our project consortium. Thanks for sharing, Ivo. There's also another question, Jyri. What do you think of the role of private actors in adult education? Might be clashes between state which want to preserve a certain status, traditional, and private actors which want to change something?
Yeah, this is also very interesting. In our report, we have one chapter where we actually try to give examples of how this kind of teaching activities are taking place in the margins, so to say, in the gray area between the state organized adult education and the very private activists. Because usually, for example, social movements or groups of activists or people who are worried about social injustice in the society, they are organizing this kind of change-oriented programs or courses or groups discussions. For example, artistic methods are usually used by this kind of marginalized actors, which are not actually receiving not necessarily state support or financial support for these activities, but they somehow manage to organize them. Because as you said, and as the theoretical point of view is that the state is not necessarily willing to finance and organize and support this kind of activities, which can make the life of the ruling class a bit more difficult. This happened for Paulo Freire, for example, in South America. He was sent away from from South America because he was acting in a dangerous way by helping people to understand that they are treated as slaves in the countryside. So this is a good question. This kind of learning activities take place in many places which are outside the normal education system. Not always, but mainly.
There are some praises for you, Jyri, in the chat.
Yes, so yeah.
Thanks a lot again. What do you think? Should we move on to the next speaker and then maybe take some more questions or an open or treat some of them during the discussion?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Perfect. So thank you so much again. I would now like to give the floor to Irena. Our colleague from Switzerland. She's the vice director of SWEB, the Swiss Education Association. She's now uploading her slides. Perfect. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Irena. We can't hear you. I guess the microphone is muted.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I would like to give you just a very brief insight into one of the change-oriented projects we have collected in the FuturelabAE project. So it's a project I'm not directly involved in. It's just to give you one of the examples. And the example is called Policy Kitchen. Oh, I can't go on with the presentation. Oh, just a moment. Yeah, now. So this is actually not a project, but it is and not a course, but it is a collaborative platform, an innovation platform, and it has been around for some years now. So it is run by, it's being run by a quite well-known Swiss think tank. And you can see here it's a collaborative platform, which the aim of which is to discuss public issues and create new ideas, and it's related to policy, like the name says. So the idea is that you invite people to contribute ideas or to create so-called challenges. If there's anything they think should be discussed or there would be needed any measures in foreign policy, so you can launch a challenge. Everybody can start and participate in existing groups. And you can see here two examples of these topics. One is shaping a sustainable digital world. And the second one is what should a feminist foreign policy look like in the 20s? So there are quite a lot of these issues being discussed in the group. The second one, for instance, has 94 participants, 29 ideas. So they're in the middle of a process of discussing this topic. And it's quite simple. So it's digital, but not only. They have as well offline workshops in different countries. So when you're in the process, you think it would be good to have a discussion with people, not just on a digital platform. They organize physical workshops. And the process, maybe we can go to the next slide. The process, that's why it's called kitchen. So you have an ideation process, and at the end, they try to create solutions or to propose measures. And that's where the process ends. So it's not an involvement in policy. It's really just a collaborative process to get people's ideas into policy. Yeah, and here you can see one of the solutions. So solutions are mainly guidelines or recommendations for policymakers. if you have a look at this, you can see there's question was how to reopen the borders after the corona crisis. So quite important issue right now. But the solution is, for instance, information for travelers or massive testing of population. So you can see here the solution is not necessarily very original or innovative, but the worth of these processes is more in the discussion sometimes. There can be really new ideas proposed to policymakers, but much of it's really about getting people involved. It's about empowering and about encouraging everybody to get involved. So this was very briefly what the project is about. And what's most interesting, of course, the question, why is Policy Kitchen change-oriented? So I have heard from Jyri that there are several aspects important when we talk about change. You can see here, collect a few of these aspects. So it's the platform is participative. Everybody can start a challenge on any topic. It's collaborative, so there is no gatekeeper deciding whether an idea is worth discussing or not. The groups are free to organize themselves. You have on and offline discussions, and it's where it's based mainly on dialogue. So as we've heard, methods are quite important in change-oriented adult education. And on this platform, it's mainly about dialogue. They work with different methods, but dialogue is usually one of the most important methods. Next point, results are publicly accessible, so every voice gets heard. And solutions can have an impact. So when we go back to this Jyri's question about reform or revolutionary potential of change-oriented adult learning, you can decide about looking at this platform, what the impact really is. And one impact is, of course, empowerment of the people. So make them believe that they can have an impact and that everybody counts. So you don't have to be an expert to propose any idea or measure to politics. Okay, so maybe just a word on what kind of change there is intended to be in this platform. You have a society level. Here, of course, the intention is to have an impact on the real policy, but you have to know that Policy Kitchen ends when the solution is cooked, so there is no further involvement in policy measures. It happens that the groups or leaders of Policy Kitchen get invited by the government to comment on the solutions, but it's not the idea to continue a political process. More important maybe is the individual level. As I said, it's a way of empowerment, call to express one's view about public issues. It's an experience people can make of also of being heard by policymakers. So as you know, Switzerland is a democracy, so we have lots of opportunities to participate in political processes, but we don't have many opportunities to really discuss the topics. So that's one of them. Okay, I won't be too long, so just very briefly on the second example. It's another platform, and its mission is to work towards sustainable development goals. And I don't talk it's long about this platform. It's interesting just because it has a toolbox on the internet, and this toolbox is full of not just methods, but examples of how these methods can be applied. You can see here a few examples. It's about like how to do it early evening. It's about kind of medicine walk, fishbowl, guided journaling. This is just a way of get impulses, helping people understand how you could use these methods. Okay, so then I'll come to the end. Just if I had to say in just one sentence what the benefits of these projects are, so I would say it helps everyone to see things with different eyes. So it's not in the core of the projects to say let's change the system, but it has a lot to do in the way they work, as far as I know it, that changing perspectives and expanding the scopes of action of the individuals. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you. Do you have questions or comments? Or maybe some of you are working with this kind of methods, would like to share experiences?
Thank you so much for your presentation. While people maybe are typing, I would like to, there is someone with the raise hands. Yes, okay, there are already, yes, please, go ahead.
I'm Monica from Romania, and I work in an NGO working on education, but I'm also a community facilitator. So I worked a lot in rural areas in Romania, facilitating communities. So for me, it's like I have a question related to the examples in the project, the examples of the projects you just gave. Thank you for that. It's just to understand a little bit maybe the concepts. It's change-oriented adult education. For instance, for me, like when you talk about that, my understanding, it's like when you talk about adult education, change-oriented, then we have like specific, I see it as a structured process with specific learning objectives that maybe can be measured at the end. Like the first example, for instance, you gave about the policy kitchen, for me, it's more like community development. So it's more about the empowerment. There are some changes at the individual level, but I see it more under the umbrella of the community development, like more participation. So maybe, I don't know if, probably there is not, you know, there are like, the terms probably they intersect somewhere, so they are overlapping with each other, but maybe if there are like, what are the differences, or what, why do you see the first project or change-oriented adult education more than community development, or it's just overlapping? I don't know. I don't know if I'm clear with my question, but just from the conceptual point of view.
Yeah. Do you want to reply already, Irena, or do we open also this to Jyri? Because I've seen there is also another question from Dorte, very specific on the policy kitchen, as you prefer.
Yeah, I would just say a word. Maybe Jyri can tell more about this. It's on the national level, so it's not community development, but I think it's a good question. You can tell about the concept, why, how much change really there is on the society level. But maybe Jyri can say something about connections with community education more than me.
Actually, I can't, because you know better the practice. But I can't see why this this kitchen couldn't be used as a community development tool as well, if they are taking some challenges which are related to the smaller community instead of a society in general. The tool and the method could be used both on society and community level. There's also a question in chat about the participants. Are they people with higher education, or maybe Irena can reply that one?
Yeah, I was just writing. So it's not for people with higher education, actually. It's really open to everybody. And I talked to the people who lead this think tank, or this policy kitchen. And they told me it's it's easier to get people with higher education involved, so that's reality. But they're trying to get other people involved as well, and that's one of the reasons why they organize offline workshops, because it seems easier to get people involved that way and then get them later on the digital platform.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. Also because there is also a comment from another participant about open discussion that are not always democratic and maybe dominated by educated members of the community. Do you have anything to add? Yeah, Dragana says that he also agrees with Martin's comment.
Yeah, about the open discussions. Yeah, well, I'm not enough involved in this policy kitchen to really be able to say. I think it's a matter of how you use the methods, because the method in itself is doesn't create the change. You have to use it in a good way, probably. Maybe Jyri can say more about this.
I can say one example. In Finland, we have a method called timeout. It has been described in our website as well, the project website. And the idea of this timeout discussion method is to organize this kind of discussions in a very democratic way. There are some basic rules which you have to follow when you make comments and when you organize the discussions. So the whole idea of this timeout method is to get rid of this kind of domination and different educational levels in the discussion situations. I have once participated in this kind of discussion myself, and it works very well. I can try to send you some link on chat on this. I just have to search for some materials. But in our report, it's reported as one good case as well. So if I can't find anything, so you can have a look at the report.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you. I can also maybe add that in the next webinars, we'll be discussing, the next one will be on digitalization challenges, but the following one will be exactly on practices and tools that can be of inspiration to all of you. And we will try to select different ones so that can be transferred maybe in different contexts. Are there any further questions? Someone that wants to share something? As you have seen, we can give you the floor like we did with Monica, and you can actually tell us more about your work, your challenges. There is an experience from Ireland, from Sarah Keheller. They have a lot of success with the discussion group in Dublin. Do you want to tell us more, Sarah? Yes, she wants to tell us more. Thank you so much. Oliver now will give you the floor. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, they were held with, the discussion groups have been held for the last few years, probably about 4 times a year, with adults primarily and also young people, in a what we call, suddenly I forgot the name, kind of a kitchen format where people sit in round tables and they're all given the same question, and then they move to another table and answer the same questions or different questions on different tables, so they get a chance to explore in small groups different issues. I suppose what that hasn't led to, though, is a harvesting of the information to change policy. It's been primarily focused on the participants who they themselves would get ideally have it, as was said earlier, find a different way at looking at the same thing. But we find it's probably the only way to access people living with disadvantage is to meet them face to face. Online doesn't work as well. And you have to create a safe environment where they feel that their opinion is appreciated and not laughed at, I mean, obviously. But that in itself is difficult. And most of the people who participated were already participating in another local community group or youth organisation. So they weren't people who came in off the street, because they would have already probably participated in a range of other self-development processes. But it is a fantastic way to gain the insight from people who actually experience disadvantage rather than people who want to change it from the outside.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. Jyri, Irena, do you want to comment on this?
It's just it's very interesting to hear this from this experience, and it was a bit similar what I heard from the Policy Kitchen, that collaborating with organizations who work with, like for instance, low qualified people or different groups of people who don't have much access to education, worked quite well to organize. They organized meetings that were not structured like courses, but more like social events, so from meeting people, and started from there. And then it seems to work on the digital platform, but only later. So if someone said in the chat, make people believe that their voice matters. And that was my impression, that this is the first step. And that
Right.
it starts more offline. And it's a process, not just one challenge, one topic, and then the next group, but you have to work with people over a certain time. So yeah.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. I've seen also in the chat there is a suggestion from Ivo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. To Martin, so nice that we have this interaction between participants. He suggests a website, and there are a lot of experiences with this challenge. Great, thank you so much also for sharing and for interacting with each other. Are there any further questions or projects, tools that you want to share? Or let's come back to the theories, benefits of change-oriented practice that you want to either raise or ask. Monica is asking for the floor. Please.
Yeah, no, I just felt like intervening because I liked very much the example given by Sarah also, and I like this idea of like creating a safe space for disadvantaged people. This is what happens very often in Romania. So we go in communities and we work with vulnerable groups, and it's not working if you don't give them this safe space to make them feel actually safe, that their voice can be heard, to be listened to. So I think it's really crucial for this kind of gatherings, workshops, in working with adults. So this is what we are also trying to do, and we are facing like challenges. Maybe it's not the topic, but digitalization also, it's not really working with vulnerable groups, at least not at this moment, but can be a first step, can be like face-to-face meetings, and then to create the environment for digitalization. So thank you for that. I wanted to share one example from one of our projects, because we worked with Paulo Freire methodology, Theater of the Oppressed, Forum Theater, and we worked on domestic violence in a village. So together with adults and young people in the community, in the rural area in Romania, we created, so the challenge was like the domestic violence rate was really high. So together with them, actually they created this Forum Theater, and they played it in front of the community, and it works really, the theater, the play was really, really nice. There are challenges, probably we'll discuss in the next webinar. So for us, one of the learnings was like, it's also, we need to learn how to use this kind of tools, because actually what we discovered that people had a lot of fun, And after that, actually, the change was the opposite. So they said, oh, okay, it's legitimate. So maybe we didn't know how to use it properly at that time. But it's a very, very good tool, actually, in working with communities, with adults, with young people. And for us, it was a lot of learning from using this kind of tools. So this is, yeah, in change-oriented education. So for us, that was in 2000 when we just started in Romania to use this kind of method. So actually, since then, there is an improvement, but they're absolutely brilliant. So myself and my organization, we really believe in this kind of education. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to you. Great to hear. We also had, it's not the same concept, but we had a playback theater in our last event organized in the framework of the project. You can have a look in our website. There is also a small video with some pictures, though unfortunately we didn't manage to record. But theater is certainly a powerful way to make people feel close to the topic and then feel part of it. You see also in the chat, people are thanking you for sharing. Sarah provided us with the name for the method that she was referring to before. It's called Community Cafe. I've also heard it called a Knowledge Cafe, but maybe there are some slight differences between the concepts. But indeed, I guess the free lunch also is very inviting for everyone to join. And here in Brussels, they do organize conferences with free coffee, which is already a good motivation. Irena, Jyri, do you want to still add something? Maybe 2 words to comment on the last interventions?
Maybe I can say first. Thank you all. The chat has been very interesting. There's a lot of experience I can see in this group, and it's interesting to see that these practices actually are taking place in real life, not only in theory, which is my point of view. So this has been very educative process and hour for me as well. So now, Irena.
Yeah, same thing for me. Thanks a lot to everybody. It's a pity we don't have more time to hear about the rest of you, why you're here, what's your interest in change-oriented adult education, and what experiences you're making. So maybe we see you in the next module again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. For certain, we will have more, well, hopefully also, we'll have more the chance to hear from you through the forums, through the learning tasks. I would like to stress that the Moodle course is actually a way for us to stay in contact and to exchange. So I hope you don't feel the pressure to join an online course. It's a non-formal online course. So this will be, I guess, I hope the moment where we can learn from each other. I thank you all. I thank you all for your time, for being here with us. I thank Oliver for the technical support. Again, thanks a million, Irena and Jyri, for being with us. And the next webinar will be in 2 weeks and 1 day. It will be on Thursday afternoon. We'll share you more information about it via the Moodle, via our website. So again, thanks for joining. As Jyri said, has been very, very educative, informative, and a pleasure to meet you all.